Hey guys! So in today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about me going to New Zealand and what that looks like for Cherie and I, because it's probably what we get asked the most, and there's the most amount of worry or fear in kind of the ethos for us. And so I'm going to do my best to kind of share hopefully some context in terms of the strategy that Cherie and I are really planning for this trip. So, to catch anyone up to speed who already doesn't know, I'm moving to New Zealand, potentially up to 2 years, while my partner Cherie, who I've been together with, I think we're going on 6 years now, 5.5. 4 of those were in a monogamous relationship, and about a year and a half now we've been polyamorous, which I don't necessarily like the label, and many people might not even know what that means, but essentially we've opened up our relationship fully, or at least that's the ideal, that's what we're working towards, to allow absolute freedom for each of us, to essentially have intimate relationships with other people and not any kind of rules or restrictions, even though we are together, we view each other as a couple. We are planning a long life together. We are planning a family together, but we're actively seeking to deconstruct the confines, the structure that is monogamy, and working on a new structure, because there is some amount of lines and barriers, but we're trying to have a very open sandbox, which is the languaging we use. So some core values like open communication, trust, and working towards defining just those really solid edges and having much more freedom internally inside that sandbox to essentially allow for love and intimacy to be open and freely shared and in the abundant nature that it is. So, to I think now that you're caught up to speed, so I'm moving to New Zealand for potentially up to 2 years, while Cherie will remain in Creston and do her own thing. And I think people are having challenges with this because I think there's this idea or assumption that long distance doesn't work, that it's challenging, probably because many people might have, whether it's direct or indirect experience with long distance not working. However, for Cherie and I, we're having very different conversations and asking very different questions. Questions like, how can this stage of our relationship actually improve our relationship? So we're actively seeking, and both of us are under the belief and have the intention to work towards improving our relationship in this time, rather than accepting this idea of it's going to be challenging to the relationship, it's going to be taxing, it's going to be, you can only maintain relationships at distance. Not to say we don't acknowledge it'll have its own unique challenges and it'll be hard in certain ways, but any relationship has challenges innate already. So it's not like it's almost an obviousness. It's like there's gonna be challenges for sure, but there's always challenges because we're always working to grow our relationship. So it's the same. It's just going to be a different context. It's going to be at distance, and it's going to change things. And we're very much counting on it and anticipating it and setting up our strategy to make it an opportunity to have growth in our relationship. So part of this strategy, part of what we're talking about and thinking about is, I think it's inherent to most relationships, especially long relationships where you've been with a partner for years, unless you've actively worked on it, and I would say even Cherie and I have, but we've still succumbed to it, there's a certain level of almost overstimulation. I don't know what the right word is, but you grow a little bit to not appreciate each other as much, to kind of take each other for granted because there's just so much time. We see each other every day. We live in the same house. Sometimes conversations become mundane because we're just kind of talking about our daily lives, which really, once you're in a routine of things, has some level of monotony and mundaneness, because it's like wake up, do the morning, go to work, come home, blah, 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 blah. We've implemented a few strategies to help that. So we have a weekly date day where we get under the surface, talk about everything else going on rather than just the day-to-day stuff. But we are actively planning strategies like this for when we are at distance, and really looking at it as a different opportunity and a different context for us to explore individually and as a couple. I feel a big part of our intentions, because I'm open to the world, we never know until we try. So we're going to have our best laid plans, we're going to have intentions, we're going to be trying to mold how we think this is going to work, but ultimately until we're doing it, we're not going to be aware of certain things. But that's the best you can do. You can plan as best as you can, and then as you go through, you adjust. So presently, the macro version of what these 2 years are going to look like is a lot of personal growth for the both of us, where rather than being a couple on kind of a very much together mission, we're still going to have that on the macro. Like, we're still planning a full life together, planning having children together. So in the encompassing big picture, that container is solid, where we talk about that lots. It's one of our strengths, is that we've had many conversations that we're fucking amazing partners to each other in terms of support. And so we're kind of leveraging that we have safety and security and faith of this strong external container, so that at distance, we actually get to just be more of an individual experience, more of a self and personal growth experience. And as partners, we're gonna be less like coupley and more cheerleaders, in terms of like, this is a time for both of us to be selfish in the best way, to do what we want to do, to have the experiences we want to have, to spend our time and our resources how we want to. There's a together goal, but a big part of the strategy is how can we be better supports? How can we be better cheerleaders? And how can we be selfish in our personal growth so that we can grow as individuals? We can strengthen our relationships with ourselves, so that when we come back together in the same proximity, in the same place as a couple, we have done a lot of personal growth and we will be better people. This is the idea, so that when we come back to the relationship, we're both stronger, we're both better supports. We've been able to kind of disassociate from this idea of, I think sometimes, often what happens with couples is there becomes almost a blending of identities, because there's just so much connectedness and there's so much togetherness that it's hard not to separate that. So we are actively taking this strategy to separate, to have individual experiences, to kind of deprogram and deconstruct a lot of the identity as a couple, even a lot of the monogamous ties that are like things that we might have not been aware of or even intentionally asked each other to create, but have created habits, routines, beliefs about each other and ourselves as a couple that might not be intentional. So, this is an opportunity to basically break all that scaffolding apart. You know, tear down the house we've built because it's not great, right? There's a lot of good, but there's a lot of things we can improve on, both individually and as a couple. So we're going to tear down this house. We're going to go on our own travels, using intentionally what works, keeping that, rebuilding that scaffolding. It's going to be different because distance, so we're going to create a different house, a different way to communicate, a different way of how we interact and deal with each other, how we work through things. We're going to start building new scaffolding in terms of like setting up structures and habits and beliefs around how can we be a better couple in terms of how can we support each other's individual journeys in this section of time. Again, knowing and planning that 2 years is kind of our max. Things might change inside that 2 years, but for sure in 2 years there will be coming together and there'll be a new phase in our relationship. Then I'm sure we'll have to then relearn how to live with each other a little bit, relearn compromise and negotiating. But again, that's a beautiful part about this experience, is to not have to negotiate, not have to compromise. It's like we can just go back to being individuals more, being selfish in terms of pursuing what we feel called to, pursuing what we want to, going into our interests, right? Like anyone who's been in a relationship for a long time, has dated, there's a certain level of compromise where it's like you do things that are for the other person because it makes them happy, and you, right? Not in a fake way, which I think sometimes happens too. Sometimes we just kind of begrudgingly do things. But I think the best way is to actually get to a place where we can find happiness in their happiness. So it's like we will do activities that we might not be interested in, but our partner is super interested in. And because it makes them happy, we're happy. It's like it doesn't matter what the thing is. And it's like this is how I think some of these strategies is what makes good relationships. It's like, how do you work as two connected people where, like, again, this me moving, this long distance thing isn't like, it's funny because it's like our realities are the questions we ask and the assumptions we make, and I think there's a lot of terrible assumptions made around distance and a lot of failed. It's like anything. It's like we hear more about the failures than successes. I'm sure there's tons of long distance successes out there, but they're not as predominant. They don't stick in your mind as much as all the ones that have failed. So everyone thinks distance is challenging, distance is hard, you can't do distance. Like, I at a younger age had this belief, but now I really see it as an opportunity to switch in terms of like, how do we, right, just asking better questions, like how do we improve our relationship in distance, like how do we continue to thrive and work on it, how do we change and adapt our communication, what can we learn about ourselves and each other in this process, in this time span, where again we can just grow as individuals and learn and just prosper and be like dive deep into what we want to do, and then we get to cheer each other on. It's like there just seems like so much freedom in that. I had another thought, but I think it left me. Yeah, so again, even in terms of like how we're gonna structure our communication to make sure it's not like the day to day. Cherie has some amazing ideas in terms of, we don't know what it is yet because we haven't even experimented in it, but we've gotten some ideas about kind of like a club of two where we're going to send each other podcasts or books or videos to watch and consume individually, and then once a week on our date day when we have a phone call, we're going to talk about those things and share things that we're learning and we're passionate about, and teach and educate each other because we have different interests. And often why teaching is amazing is because it's like I can filter through so many books, so much information, acquire the nuggets, and then give those to someone if they're interested. It doesn't matter if it's Cherie or someone else. It's like we can dilute, or not dilute, digest, delineate information, spend all that time, and then kind of give someone the gold that they need without them having to read and consume the same thing. So it's another thing we're going to do is like we each have different interests and passions and hobbies. Like I'm going to be more focused on finances and learning financial literacy and getting better about understanding money, how to deal with it, how to manage it, so that we can really get so that I can personally get to financial freedom. And then as a couple, we can get to financial freedom. So I'm more interested in it. I'm going to be diving deeper. I'm going to be learning lots, and I plan to teach Cherie so that she can develop some of these skills. She's a lot more interested, honestly, on the relationship side of things. A lot of her podcasts and content she consumes is more around relationships, poly, seeing other successful models of it, learning more, learning new things, terms, terminology that can be amazing informations of nuggets of information that can really like, oh, that's why we're experiencing that, or that's why we're feeling this. Is like, this is the thing that we just didn't know about before because we're pretty new and naive to this whole path. We're just kind of going at it and figuring it out as we go. Yeah, there's much, much more, but without making this a long video, I think I'm going to leave it at that. And just for anyone following me and following us, it's like you can worry, but you don't need to worry. Like we're two very conscious individuals. Our relationship is the best it's ever been. I say that all the time because it's true all the time. Like we're constantly learning and growing as a couple. And like as we work through things, we improve and get better and learn more about ourselves and learn more about each other, and we learn more about how to communicate with each other. So we're great, and we're very excited for this new opportunity because we are looking at how this is going to add to our growth individually and together. And sure, there's going to be hard times, absolutely, but it's like, but that is a constant. There's always hard times. So it's like, I don't know. It's like, it just is. It's a fact of life. It's like, I've accepted. It's like, I purposely put myself in hard situations for growth. So it's like, I could stay here, but it's like, we're even at a point where we would feel like we were, like, truthfully, we've talked about this. Like, Cherie does not want me to stay. Obviously, for some reasons she does, but she does not want me to stay. Like, because we would actually feel like we were missing something if I decided to stay. Because we're planning and we have strategized this next phase of life that we're both excited and looking forward to, and feel like we're going to get a lot of growth from, again, individually and as a couple. And so if I stayed, it would feel like, oh, we're actually going to miss out on all this other stuff that we've been talking about and planning, as opposed to like, what might be perceived if I stayed, then it's like, oh, everything's going to be fine and it's going to go back to hunky-dory. It's just not true. So yeah, hopefully that's some more context in terms of like us. And again, I share these not because I actually care whether you worry or what your opinions are of this or not, it don't matter. It doesn't matter, really. In the most loving way, I'm still going. Cherie and I are still going to do us. It's our life. It's my life. I share these because I love just, I'm doing it. I'm living it. I'm not doing it for anyone else. But if this can get you to think just differently and understand that there's so many ways to go about it, that like there's no one way to have a relationship. And so I just love sharing my life in terms of like someone else might be stuck and find value in our path and find value in even how we're looking at distance, right? It's like the difference between going into a long distance relationship with the mind frame of like we can only maintain our relationship versus going into distance where Cherie and I are actively pursuing the fact that we're going to improve our relationship. Our relationship's going to get better. Our communication's going to get better. We're going to overcome new obstacles and challenges because of the distance. And through navigating that, we're going to learn more about relationships, about each other, about communication. And so, again, the reason I want to document these is selfishly for me to look back on, but also just to bring value to someone who might consider distance or might be in distance right now and recognize like, oh shit, like maybe if we just decided that we were going to work on our relationship at distance, we could get better, right? And so, yeah, I'm going to talk in circles. I do that. So I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.